Welcome back to BVarsity Live, everybody, here at the Bakersfield, California. We're visiting with CIF Executive Director Roger Blake, and then the really big deal, Louis Amisoy walked in the door as well.
Sorry.
Whoa.
Sorry. I haven't been on for a long time.
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah, it's
true.
been nice.
We have to get quote unquote important guests to get you to join us anymore.
Well, I mean, it's like old home week for me. Inland Empire guy. He went to San Bernardino High School. He coached at one of my rival schools, Elsinore. But I mean, one of the things I think that Roger, a lot of people who came through the Inland Empire and knew Roger as a coach and as an athletic director, and later as the Lake Elsinore Unified School District athletic director. Everyone knew that he was going to go places, and when you became the CIF, executive director, it was like not a surprise to a lot of people because you've done so many great things in your career, and it's a well-deserved honor, I think, too.
Well, thank you. It surprised me. It's one of those things that I never aspired to do this job.
Oh, look at that, Louis. What is that?
Yeah.
What is that on your face?
Oh, yeah, that's my press
What is
pass.
that on your face?
Yeah. I just always wanted to be a coach. That's really what I wanted to do. And then another familiar name in both of our pasts, David Long, became my superintendent, who came from Banning, where you had been a student. And he brought me into the district office and said, I think I have a better career path for you. And I still loved the game and coaching. But so I don't know how I ended up here. It's strange.
How did Dave Long? Dave Long was the superintendent of schools. He was a longtime track and field official in Iowa. Came out to California, kind of a second career almost, and he inspired so many people, and including yourself.
Absolutely, been a mentor for me. And when he had been a high school teacher, coach, athletic director, principal, all those things, and then became a superintendent. Was at Banning. Then he came to my school district and became a mentor for me, and he was the one who said, "Hey, you can do more. You should shoot for higher things than just being a teacher, coach, administrator." And
Look at this old footage here we got of.
Yes, there you go.
Oh, that team in white! I recognize that team.
That's your 1986, 85-86 team, and playing my high school. And these were some of the greatest games. At the time.
There's no three-point line.
No three-point line.
1986. So
these were Banning High School, and we were always the two top teams in the league, always battling out for the championship.
And Roger's right down there on the right, I think, of your
that's
screen.
my
And Chris,
head,
if you want to cut to this shot of what Roger used to look like back in 1986.
There you are.
Look at that good-looking guy.
Oh, boy.
Man, you two both love the stashes.
Right.
Yeah.
Hey, Roger, I wanted to ask you, though, a little bit about the future of CIF and high school sports in particular. I mean, in California, we're sort of unique in the fact that we have these very disparate sections. You have a central section that has about 90 schools in it. You have the southern section, which is just massive. You have small sections, San Francisco and Oakland, and sometimes you hear, why do they get into the playoffs when these more deserving teams in the southern section get in there? How do you equalize that? Is the state football playoffs one way to do that, like we're going to see?
Everybody always asks, how come we're configured the way we are, small sections, large? And it's the history of the organization. It's just how it grew.
Right.
So there's when somebody goes, well, what's the logic behind it? Well, there really wasn't. I mean, when the CIF started in 1914, it's kind of ironic, but when we started in 1914, there were 4 sections. The state was just, population was a lot less, and it was just divided into 4. And then as it's grown, it's split up into more. But one of the things that we have to always look at is this is how we've always done it. Doesn't make it right.
Yeah.
It's not. Maybe there's new ways to do it. We hadn't had a football bowl championship or bowl games since 1927. Bakersfield High was the winner. And then 79 years later, we reinvented it as a bowl system, kind of like the BCS. And the problem that we faced, there's across the state 51 section champions. And only 10 originally, and now 18 were getting invited. So there were 33, 34 schools sitting there saying, well, we won our championship. How come we don't get a chance? I mean, let us play it on the field and see. And we didn't have, and there wasn't a good response for those kids. And really, honestly, when you look at it, it's not fair. It's kind of when we talk about the collegiate and the BCS. So we just recently passed, it was a close vote, whether to expand the football championships. So now every team that wins a section championship has the opportunity to go to a bowl game. We hadn't had that before.
Right.
So we think that's a good step forward. One of the other really positive steps forward that I think that's a philosophical change, but it's one we have to face as a state. we always say North and South. Oh, it's the North versus the South, and how we set that up. That doesn't make sense today. It made sense when teams in 1927 had to get on a train. The 1918 football championships weren't played because it was too far to travel from the team to the north to the team to the south with train travel. That doesn't make sense today. One of the nice things about the football championships is we're going to start breaking away from that north-south. Champions that are in the central section, some may be playing in the north, some may be playing in the south. Some of the teams in the southern section, if they're in the north part of the section, it's probably better that they're playing in the north. I mean, it's in our current configuration, we're about to come into basketball championships. Two of the teams in, I think, Bullard and who are they playing in the championship? Edison. Two northern section teams. What if in the championships in the brackets, all of a sudden now they're playing a San Diego team? That just, honestly, that doesn't make sense. But because there's been talk, well, let's move central section all to the north. Well, then we'd make just as little sense. Say Centennial had won that game the last night. Right. Now they're going to have to go and play in Reading. That makes as much sense as Fresno going to San Diego. So we've got to break. We got to get out of this box of what we used to do, because that's how we've always done it. There's lots of different ways to do it. Jim Critchlow had a great idea at one time, and we didn't get much traction, but we're going to visit it again. Why don't we, when we get to state playoffs, divide the state into four regions like the NCAA, and you really won't know what region you're going to go to until you know who all the teams are on the board because of our geography. You know, you just don't know. We've got to look at new ways to do it, because it's not fair that Fresno has to go down to San Diego or Bakersfield would have to go to Reading or Sacramento. I mean, there's better ways to do it. We have to find ways. Right, because
one of the things we deal with here is that I think the Fresno schools seem to identify more closely with the North in some cases, but it seems like Bakersfield has more of a connection to Southern California, so sometimes it does make sense. I like that kind of crossover there.
We have to. I mean, Paso Robles in football this past year went from Paso Robles to South San Diego County. Right. 8.5 hours. Really? We can't do better than that. We have to do better than that.
Absolutely. Do you think there would ever be a conversation about realignment? Has that come up in there, the realigning the sections possibly? We've had a lot of schools in the last few years, Kern Valley, a few others that were in the southern section at one point come back into the central section. Do you see that as something that might become a topic of conversation?
It comes up every 10 years, guarantee you. Every 10 years there's discussion across it. Maybe we should do this. Maybe we should do that. It's ultimately a decision of those schools in those areas. The central section just picked up, 2 different leagues that used to be in the southern section because of their geography and everything. It just made more sense that they should come over here, and this section was happy to bring them. The schools voted. That can always happen. That can always change. It doesn't take a statewide effort to do that. It's really up to the schools to look at that. But there is always a statewide discussion. It comes up, I can tell you, on the clock every 10 years. And it'll be coming up again here pretty soon. San Francisco, maybe they should be in the CCS. Maybe Oakland should be in the North Coast. Should we divide up the southern section? You know, one of the things that people don't always remember in California, and they do when they're in a plane, which I'm twice a week flying up and down our state, our geography, you know, the Tehachapi's make a big difference. Right. And, you know, people look at it and go, how come Mammoth is in the southern section and not in the central? Because they got a Sierras that they can't get over during the winter. I mean, so some of those natural geographical things do align for our section. Some of that does make sense.
Right. Roger, with the Texas state model, the parochials don't play public schools in the playoff system. Has that ever been an issue that you've thought about bringing up? Is, you know, because the open in basketball really has shown so much to be a large numbers of parochial schools in modern days, the Bishop of Dow's in Oakland. Has that ever been a thought process for you?
What's changing, and Texas is changing, and other states are too. Texas now has private parochial schools playing in their championships. And some states have talked about, well, we should divide private and public. You know, they're still kids, regardless of the schools that they're going to.
I don't think you get a true state champion. That's my opinion.
And the states that have done it, they've looked at it and they've gone, you know, the real problem isn't private and parochial. And I've said this publicly many times. It's the haves and the have-nots. We see the same teams every year in our state championships. Every year. In basketball, football, we're seeing those same schools. They're not all private schools. Right. They're public schools. Long Beach Poly, you know, We got different schools that have these areas that they play at a different level. They play an elite level. That was why the Open Division was created.
Clovis High School in wrestling.
Yes,
Yeah.
and we've said it, and I say it with a little bit of sarcasm, but it's true. They play in a different sandbox. 99% of our schools play at a high school level. They go up and down. They have great years. They have a good class of kids coming through, and then they cycle down. And we have some schools, they never cycle. Parents are shopping them. They're moving them. They play in a different sandbox. They play a different level. And that's okay. That is okay. We should cherish that and honor that. But they should all be over here playing in the same level sandbox together.
Right.
And one of the things
that's
you've seen too in your career coaching, I mean, you used to compete against Riverside, Notre Dame as an example. Garces is a good example of this year, where it's so cyclical from the parochial level. I mean, one year they'll be fantastic. They'll be able to compete with anybody. The next year they're getting killed against public schools, and that's a tough thing.
One of the things and it's changing nationally, and I know there's been controversy, especially with McFarland and cross country. It's a national effort, and it's sweeping every state's moving in that direction. And in California right now, 6 of our sections are doing a competitive model. Because what's really been shown is that the size and enrollment of your school doesn't necessarily translate into your athletic abilities and experiences, especially in some of you have a great quarterback, a great outside hitter in volleyball, the 6'11" center in basketball.
One Stanley Johnson in basketball.
One player can make a huge difference. So and I say this, and I hope I keep winning this argument, or at least trying to convince more people. When I'm a student in a classroom and as a freshman, I get an A in math. What do they tell me then as a sophomore? They move me up to algebra. And if I do an A or a B in algebra, what do? They put me up to geometry and the trigonometry and the AP class. We need to do the same in our athletic fields. And that's the progression that we're seeing across the United States now, because you are seeing the haves, and I say it with all sincerity, the haves are the ones that have all the facilities, all the great things, and parents want to put their children there.
Yeah.
And okay, that's great. They should be at a different level playing than the school that's just a normal everyday school that has up and downs and has that cyclical cycle. Let's not take away what they're doing. They're excelling just as they would in the math classroom. Let them excel. Let's put them in the classroom they belong.
Do you see ever a time when CIF would give a competitive equity model, not necessarily based on athletic performance, but maybe on other factors too? I mean, usually it's the CBEDS enrollment, but could you look at test score, socioeconomic factors to align schools more appropriately?
How about this one? How about transfers?
All right.
How many transfers do you have?
Right.
Ohio is moving to a model that, much like the Central section has done, as Los Angeles and Southern has done, San Diego, competitive. You have a competitive history model, and as you do well, you keep moving up, just like the classroom. But what Ohio is also looking at, and they're going to start a study, excuse me, they're going to start it in 2 years, I believe, in 2016 school year. So I guess that's next year.
Next year, yeah, right.
How many transfers do you have?
Wow.
At your school? Because that will also bump you up. Because the schools that are traditionally really strong every year, they have a whole bunch of new transfers. Centennial High School of Corona, not Centennial of Bakersfield, Centennial High of Corona has been phenomenal in football the last several years. Last year, I believe they had 24 students. It's a public school, so let's not get the public-private. It's a public school. They had 24 transfers on their football team. Now, they're playing at the Open Division. They're playing where they should be.
Right.
But let's say that was the first thing that's one of the things they're looking at. So should there be other factors? Yep, the mobility of society and people's transferring their children, that's going to be a factor, I think, in the future.
That's a good example, too, because Corona Centennial is one of those schools where the parents are choosing to, the district, allows it, one, but the parents are choosing to move into that district or that attendance boundary to get those kids into that program.
And it's not just down south also. Emmanuel of Reedley, which is a private school here in the Central section, I have a source that told me that 23% of their enrollment are transfers also. So it's not just in the southern section. It's not just up in San Joaquin in the Bay Area.
No,
it's right here at home, too, for us.
And it's not a California issue.
Right.
It's a national issue. Everybody's dealing with this.
It's a fascinating conversation. Can we steal a few more minutes of your
Absolutely.
time, Roger? All right, we'll take our second break. We'll be back with more Roger Blake, CIF Executive Director, after this on BVarsity Live.
One thing about living in Kern County is all these great rivalries.